Hello again, Joan.
Hello, Phil.
You've shocked me, Joan.
Now what?
Yes, now what? You send me an innocent attachment to an email, and I read it, and then I look at one of your recent Substack postings, and you say, I've always been a religious person. That pulls the rug on my my understanding of where you're coming from. I thought that was the last thing you would call yourself a religious person.
Well, as I talked about in that post, in for many years now, I've kind of preferred the word spiritual to religious, as many people have, who don't really find themselves in a kind of traditional religion or a traditional religious framework. Um, and then I was, as I mentioned in that Substack post, I was listening to a podcast interview by Krista Tippett of Nick Cave, in which she was talking about his religious experience. And he was using the word religion and said he actually preferred the word religion. So I ended up kind of just riffing on the word religion. And when I say I've always been a religious person, what I mean is, is just that I've always been drawn to religion or spirituality ever since childhood. And I wasn't raised by people who were overtly religious, but I read books about it. I just had a feeling for spirituality, and all my since my youth I've been involved off and on in various, and for many years that's been the focus of my life. So and I've never quite managed. Anytime I try to sort of fit myself into a church or a temple or a Zen center or anything, I always kind of feel like I end up feeling like a round peg in a square hole, or whatever the word is. Like it's never quite the right fit. Springwater came the closest, to me, of being in resonance with where I'm at, and but I needed to leave that too, just because, although I'm still remain very close to people there, and Tony I regard as my main teacher, Tony Packer, but I needed to find my own way, kind of. And so anyway, by when I say I'm a religious person, I don't mean that to me religion. I mean, people mean different things by religion, and to me, what I mean by it is not about belief. It's not about believing in a bunch of dogmas um, or anything like that. In fact, it's the opposite. It's really the letting go of belief and simply being present here now. And yeah, and that has many dimensions that we can talk about or explore. But um, but that to me is what I mean by religion.
Well, I'm
Um,
glad you clarified that, Joan, because that's exactly the opposite of what I thought you meant. So,
oh,
so, so we would be talking at cross purposes if you hadn't said that. I would call that a religious sensibility, but not a religious practice.
I didn't use the word practice. I mean, you inserted that word. I don't like the word practice very much, so I try not to use it. I occasionally do. I said religious person, which is also kind of inaccurate because religion is really it's taking you sort of beyond the person.
But
But
just to
yeah.
clarify, you didn't grow up with any sort of traditional religious background.
No, no, my parents were not involved in a church or anything. My mother, I would describe as a deeply spiritual person. She did get into a church later in life, mainly because she liked their social service projects, and she did have a feeling for wholeness and love, and but not when she couldn't really see very well. So when she'd be in her church at the end of her life reciting the creed, that you're supposed to believe in, she would be saying blah 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 blah, and she couldn't see the hymnal either. So when she was, and she would belt out the hymns, but she would be singing blah 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 blah, and and so she didn't believe in any of the dogma. She had a deep spiritual sensibility, if you want to put it that way, but. And in fact, and my father was kind of an atheist. He was more into, he ran a small printing business with one employee. He was on his feet all day running printing presses, but he read books about Einstein and stuff, and he was very into a scientific perspective, and he was a determinist. So he was not, I mean, he had a very, I would say, he had a lot of insights that I would describe as spiritual insights, but he wouldn't have thought of them that way. And in fact, when I was a little child, at one point I put up a tent in the backyard and offered classes to the Catholic children next door on how God does not exist until until my mother made me take down my sign and stop holding my classes. She said, "This really is not okay. You can't be doing this." And and then I joined the Congregational Church when I was kind of a teenager, I guess. And the minister was, it was a very progressive church. And the minister, I asked him, what is God? And his answer was something like energy. I mean, he did not say God is our Father in heaven. So I never had that picture of God and I never had that oppressive religious upbringing that so many people have suffered through. So I can approach. I've written a chapter in the book I'm working on about God because I do use the word sometimes, and I quoted some of this in one of my recent Substacks, but I printed it out so I could read it here if you'd let me do that.
I'd love you to. Go on.
Okay, so here we
It's
go.
not. It's not that long, is it, Joan? That's a.
No, it's one page in
Go on.
big type.
Go on. I might interrupt you, but go on.
I love the word God, but I know that not everyone does. God, as I mean it, is not some deity up in the sky directing the show. God is not a thing. The late Thomas Keating, a Trappist monk, described God as emptiness containing infinite possibilities, or absolute nothingness. God is pure potentiality, the germinal darkness out of which everything emerges, the zero on which all other numbers depend, the very core of our being, the timeless, eternal unicity, the sphere whose center is everywhere and whose circumference is nowhere, that which is subtlest and most intimate, closer than close, and yet also infinite and boundless. God is another word for silence or stillness or presence. God is pure light, pure consciousness, the intelligence energy that is all there is. God is a way of seeing the sacred everywhere, seeing the light in everything, beholding it all from love, from the perspective of wholeness, seeing and being the whole picture. God is unconditional love. Awakening is about opening to God, allowing God, abiding in God, dissolving into God. When I open to God, immediately there is no me and no God. There is only this vast openness. God is at once my most intimate being and at the same time transcendent. God is not other than this presence here and now, and yet God is also a relationship, a dialogue of sorts, a way of listening to myself and the whole universe. It has been said that the formed universe is God speaking, but God is impossible to define or pin down.
Thank you, Joan. You've
Yeah.
you've just you've just stolen my thunder because
Oh,
uh, I I'd written all my notes down for this conversation, and you've just nicked it all.
Well, I mean, we could go more deeply into any of those things that were said.
We are. We'll be here all night. We're going to. I hope. I
Good.
hope. I hope you've got a glass of water or something stronger to hand, because.
I do. I have my gin and tonic here.
Oh,
No, I'm
excellent.
just kidding. I don't drink. This is water. Just in
Yeah.
case anyone might take me seriously.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
No, I mean, to me, it's like when we're silent, when we're still, what is that? I mean, you can't put a word on that, whatever, just that openness, that presence, that aliveness. And and actually, if you look at any form, any apparent form, and you look deeply at it, a water glass or anything else, you find infinity. You find ungraspable infinity. And at the same time, there it vividly is, a water glass. So it's whichever way you go, whether you go into sort of silent stillness or into, kind of really deeply looking, hearing, listening to sounds or looking at colors or whatever, you come to the same kind of vast no-thingness, and that's what I would call God.
Well, thank you for that. That that is really helpful. My favorite medieval mystic is Meister Eckhart, Christian mystic,
Uh,
and
uh,
one of my favorite sayings of his, which you'll be familiar with, is there is nothing closer to God than silence.
yeah, yeah, I love
Uh,
that. Yeah,
yeah, and
yeah.
that's where I inhabit when meditating, either alone or with John or with anybody. But it's in the silence.
John Butler just evokes, transmits, abides in that so
Mhm.
beautifully. And as did my main teacher, Tony Packer, and when you're listening to him or when I would listen to her, you just feel that. I mean, you feel that presence, that stillness, that silence, and yeah, I love that. I love that about John. Yeah,
The other thing
yeah,
that came to mind, Joan, when you were reading that, is a different tradition. I'm not sure you could call it a religious tradition even. Do you say the Tao or the Tao? Which
the
how do
Tao.
you
I say the Tao,
the
but
Tao?
the Tao, but
Well, you know that the opening line of the Tao Te Ching is the Tao that can be told is not the eternal Tao. Uh,
yeah.
so
After which he writes whatever it is, 95 verses or however many about the Tao. So it's like, yeah, you can't put this into words, you can't speak it, and at the same time you have to say something. So
so forgive me for saying so, but you've confused me. This is my problem, not yours. Because you know what you mean. This is the whole problem of using words, of course. You know what you mean by saying religion has always attracted me, but what you're meaning to my ears is quite different from what I mean when I tell you that I am doing my very best to lose my religion, to 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 quote Michael Stipe. After 60 years of being very definitely Christian, on my Camino to Santiago, ending last Easter Sunday in Santiago Cathedral, I ditched most of my religious Christian religious dogma on the wayside and was glad of it. So, in a way, we see. I'm surprised to say or to observe we seem to be going in opposite directions just at the
Well,
moment, and this is very
well,
interesting to me.
I don't know that we're really going in opposite directions because, to me, a religion, what religion as I mean it, isn't about the dogma and the
Yes, it
beliefs,
is. Yes, it
though
is.
though it may well for many people that is what they mean by religion, and I
Yes, of
suspect that's what you're ditching, not that silent presence
course.
that you feel so deeply, and so it's of course the word God is loaded, and I use it because I love it, but I also know that for many people it's a very loaded word, and but and I do, perhaps because I wasn't raised in a religious tradition, I can sort of be with I love ritual, for example. To me, I mean, ritual is a way of kind of making visible the invisible, or allowing the invisible to shine through. And so I love rituals like the Catholic Mass or Buddhist Buddhist bowing and chanting or singing bhajans, that kind of thing. And I don't really, if I, it's not like the words. I don't even register kind of the words necessarily. like like I don't believe that Jesus was the only begotten Son of God who died to save us from our sins or anything. But I can appreciate what I would see as the myth of the crucifixion, resurrection, and I don't mean the crucifixion wasn't necessarily a myth, that probably really happened, but the resurrection I don't take literally, but I can appreciate the sort of mythology of what's being depicted there in terms of being with the worst imaginable suffering that a human could go through, betrayal, false accusation, death, torture, and coming out of it with "Thy will be done." Forgive them; they know not what they do, and then a new life, so to speak. So I can appreciate a lot of the religious symbolism and mythology, but I don't take it literally or as something that I believe in. It's like it's just something beautiful that evokes something, or
So,
can evoke something.
so if I made the distinction, Joan, between religion as a set of beliefs as opposed to religion as ritual, you'd be on the side of religion as ritual. Is that fair?
No, no, no. I mean, I don't. The heart of religion isn't really the forms. The heart of religion is what the forms evoke. It's that silence, that stillness, that presence, that openness. But I'm not, like Tony Packer. She left all the rituals of Zen behind when she created, with her many friends, she created a new place, Springwater Center. And, at Springwater Center, we still had silent sittings, but there was no bowing, there was no chanting, there was no altar, there was no, all of that, was gone. No robes, no, no, none of the ritual or paraphernalia was there. No, and so she like really eliminated all that, and that was beautiful. I mean, I loved being at Springwater, which was just clear of all that. That was beautiful. But I can also just appreciate being in a Catholic church or being in a Zen center where there is ritual. I'm not allergic to it, but I don't see the forms as being the essence of religion by any means.
Well, are you familiar with? I think you like Alain de Botton. I think you've read. I
Ooh,
think Alain de Botton. He's an English philosopher, and he runs the School of Life, which is
I don't think I've ever heard of him.
and he's very bald. He's instantly recognizable.
I don't
he's
think I've ever heard of him.
he's
No.
he is literally an egghead. He's lovely. He's tall and bald, and he is an intellectual. Let's be right. He would agree to that. But he's written a book called "Religion for Atheists," where he promotes, genuinely promotes, the benefits of religious practice like community, hymn singing, liturgy, good works as well, but with no belief, no worship of God. It's a the benefit is to atheists and believers or none in participating together in rituals, art,
Yeah.
making art,
Yeah.
singing.
Yeah. Yeah. I think a lot of a lot of the beauty of being part of a religious group is the community aspect, being, with other people. And part of why ritual appeals to me is that I have a very devotional side. And by devotion, I don't necessarily mean devotion to a guru, or I mean devotion to presence, devotion to, the everything, the beauty of this moment, devotion to being. But I have a very kind of devotional makeup, I guess. So I think being part of a religious group, that's one of the things that makes me long for that often. And so then I rush out and try to join some church or Zen center or something, and it's like, no, 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 this doesn't really work. But
Can you see
but
yourself?
yeah.
Can you see yourself in a nun's habit, Joan?
Well, as a child, I really well, because I was always a bit transgender, I saw myself as a monk, not a nun, which I realized was a bit of a problem. But 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 yes, I I I imagined becoming a monk when I was a child, and of course, and it's still. I think I am really kind of a monk at heart. That is really kind of. I mean, a monk. Like I love David Stendhal Ross' definition of a monk, which is also I quoted in the book I'm working on. But it's basically about, I can't remember his wording, but it's basically about being in devotion to the present moment. That's the life of a monk. Listening, listening silence, and and yeah, so I think I am a kind of monk. And I could never be a Catholic monk, obviously. I mean, I don't believe in all the dogma and everything, and I that would never work out.
You could be
But
you could be in a silent order and never have to admit it.
yeah, yeah, yeah. But I was, like for example, Pope Francis just died a few days ago on Easter Monday, and I was, I've been really living with his death for since it happened because I he touched me, he touched my heart a lot, and he's the most progressive pope we've had in a long time, and he just was a beautiful. I felt like he was a beautiful soul in so many ways, and so yeah, I was, and we knew it was coming. He was obviously at the end of his life, but and I was very moved that because it must have taken tremendous effort to do what he did in the last few days of his life, given how ill he was, and the fact that he defied the advice of his nurse and everything else, and went out and addressed the people, and even rode around in his Pope mobile and blessing people and everything, and had a meeting with J.D. Vance, in which I assume he was hoping to convey something, and the fact that he did those things in the last days of his life, I found very moving, and yeah, so. And at the same time, there's a whole lot of things about the Catholic Church that that I find horrifying. So, um,
I heard a little snippet on the BBC News in the car just earlier today, actually, Joan, which was very lovely and touching. He left strict instructions that his lying in state, he would not be on a raised dais, he would be on the floor. And I thought, how humble, genuinely humble, and that puts his attitude just in a in proper perspective. You can't get lower than being laid out dead on the
Yeah.
floor. I thought that was lovely.
And that's the way he was from the beginning. I mean, when he first, was made pope and went out onto the balcony, as they do, he refused to wear the special shoes, and then he didn't sleep in the palatial palace. He slept in this little humble apartment, and that was seemed to be part of his way of being. And he always seemed just very much identified with the poor, the dispossessed, people who were suffering, which is very much how I see Jesus. I mean, I've always felt a real deep attraction to Jesus.
Well, I have to disappoint you now. We are allowed to have honest conversations here, aren't we, Joan? Between us,
Of course,
we're,
yes, of course.
we're not going to do any cover-ups here. But I've just released. I've got my own very mini YouTube channel where I talked about the on Easter Sunday last year. I did go to the Santiago Cathedral to the Catholic Mass, and when I came out, I recorded a video, and I said I will never go to a Catholic Mass ever again. But what really pulled the rug for me, partly the theology, but it's the patriarchy, and the women had no role other than to collect the cash in the whole of
Yeah,
an hour and a half service. So it just sticks in my throat,
yeah.
the Catholic practice of religion. So can you get the flavour of why, for me, the word religion now is bitter.
Yeah, well, religion has always been a mixed thing. I mean, horrible things have been done in the name of the religion. The Crusades, the the fundamentalist Islam. I mean, the witch burnings. Horrible things have been done in the name of religion, and also some wonderful things have been done. It's often religious groups that go to where there's been a tornado or a hurricane or something and helping people out. So it's always been a mixed bag. And anytime you have a tradition, and this goes for governments as well, but governments can change a little more easily usually because with religion, once you have a religion that's belief based, and you believe that, the dogma and the ideas and the rituals and everything is sort of like, this is what God wants. This is God. You have someone like the Pope who is supposedly in direct contact with God in a way that not everyone else is, and all of that. Immediately, or a guru who, people believe is an intermediary between them and God, or them and wholeness. Yeah, so that's the dark side of religion and tradition in many ways in general, and for sure, patriarchy has been an aspect of probably almost every religion. It's and it's gradually changing, but it's changing more rapidly in some places than in other places. I mean, Pope Francis apparently did. He did apparently appoint women to some very high places in the Catholic whatever hierarchy or organization or something, but not maybe they weren't visible positions, and he didn't, you know, bring forth the ordination of women as priests. He didn't do that. He was, he made a slight improvement around lesbian, gay people. He said you could bless same-sex marriages and that kind of thing, but he didn't go all the way. So he took some baby steps in a progressive direction around social issues and changing things, but he was the Pope. He was the Pope, and I've also known some nuns like Tony Packer used. Maybe did we talk about this in our last video? Because I don't want to repeat it, but the nuns that ran the place where Tony Packer held her retreats for a while, they were just, there's some really wonderful nuns. I used to live in a building in Chicago that had nuns living there, and not everybody there was a nun, but I mean there were a lot of nuns, and nuns are often very progressive, and they've kind of like one of the nuns at this retreat facility was a Jewish by birth, had converted to Catholicism and become a nun, but was very into Zen, and she described herself as a Jewish Buddhist Catholic nun. And the Catholic Church had not excommunicated her. I mean, I suppose if they knew too much about her, they might have, but she was flying under the radar or whatever. And I'm sure that one day women will be ordained as priests in the Catholic Church. It may not happen in my lifetime, but I'm sure it will happen eventually. For one thing, they just don't have enough people going to seminaries anymore, so they're going to need some women.
Coming back to the G question, the God question, I don't like to use the G word when I'm talking to people, even about my Christian faith, which sounds a paradox. But you put your finger on it at the beginning of our conversation, Joan. It's so easily misunderstood what I mean by God and what somebody else means by God can be two completely different things. I was once collared by a schoolboy in a blazer on Church Street in Sheffield, a city where I lived at the time, and he had a clipboard, and he said, "Do you mind if I ask you a few questions?" I said, "No, go ahead." I'm doing a project. He said, "Do you believe in God?" I said, "Which one?" And he went away. So if you use the G word, you have no idea really what the other person means by that. So last time we spoke, you wanted to know what my understanding of God is, and it's very pertinent because in the next, I'm halfway through the next, I've just finished a book which I must send to you, but the next book is called Mistaken Identity, and it's all about consciousness. And you cannot talk about consciousness, well, I can't talk about consciousness without coming to grips with God or spirit or presence or silence, or you just can't avoid it. But what I've settled on, Joan, and you'll be familiar with the phrase, but I'd like to explore it a bit with you. Again, it's more of a Meister Eckhart. There's the phrase "the ground of being,"
Yeah.
and that's sufficiently sort of all inclusive. But to me, it's profoundly helpful and profoundly true. I actually say it in my meditation practice every morning for the past 10 or 15 years, the ground of being. I say, I come to rest in the unconditional acceptance of the ground of being. And it's like you talked about dissolving into God.
Yeah.
And that's, for me, that's my preferred phrase. Instead of using the word God, I like to use ground of being. Unfortunately, the acronym ends up as GOB, so and you can't really. It's inconvenient. I believe in GOB, the ground of
Yeah.
being.
Well, yeah. I mean, I use that term sometimes too, the ground of being. Um, Yeah, and I often say the groundless ground of being. I also like the word groundlessness a lot because it points to the kind of ungraspable no-thingness, the way everything is ultimately no form really holds still, no form actually even exists because it's all uh, changing, impermanent, and interdependent with everything else. Whether you see that as everything is consciousness or Buddhist interdependence or whatever, but those are the formulations. But the experientially, it's just like, um, yeah, groundless. And that's also the absence of belief is kind of groundlessness, like
Mm.
there's nowhere to stand, there's nothing to hold on to.
I think
Yeah.
that's where we sort of, if I can put it paradoxically, Joan, we both stand on the same groundless ground. And I think we were very congruent in that. I think we're both very familiar now, you more than me, on what I really I'm not a fan of the word non-duality. I wish there was a more accurate or convenient term. It's I find it really unhelpful, that term non-duality. But if we are,
Well, why would it be unhelpful?
because it's
I
a
mean,
negative,
people.
it's a negative.
Oh, but the negative is beautiful. Groundlessness is a negative. I mean, no thingness is a negative. It's like, to me, it's a marriage of both the via negativa and the via positiva or whatever. Or, yeah, it's like a non dual to me just means wholeness. It means that everything is an indivisible, seamless, boundless whole that where there's infinite diversity, but you can't really pull it apart. You can't really separate anything out from the whole. So it's like the ocean, there's all these different waves, but they're all expressions of or movements of the ocean. They're never really separate from the ocean or from each other. So to me, that's what non-duality means. And we're not separate because it also means seeing through the illusion of the kind of separate independent self who seems to be inside here, the little ghost in the machine who seems to be thinking my thoughts and making my choices and performing my actions and sort of trying to get to God or something like that, as opposed to being God, being this indivisible wholeness or no thingness.
Now you're
Non-duality also,
talking.
no, and non-duality to me also like really points to the fact that opposites or polarities go together. They only exist relative to each other. It's like the ceiling is up in relation to the floor and down in relation to the sky. They only exist. You can't have up without down or dark without light. So it's like, and we in the West have often sort of tried to abolish the darkness and have only the light or something like that. And I think in the East, in the Eastern religious traditions and philosophies, they've always seen that these go together. You can't separate them. You can't have one without the other. So, or like in political terms, the left and the right, it's like you can't have one side, there's no one-sided coins. There's no one-ended sticks. They just don't exist. So it's like,
I've not heard that one before, Joan. Very good.
yeah. And you can't really find a place on a coin where heads turns into tails, or whatever words you use in the
Yeah.
UK for heads and tails. Um, you can't really find a place, like there's no clear dividing line, and if you eliminate the coin, if you don't have the boundary of the coin, there isn't even heads and tails anymore. I mean, so
Yeah,
yeah.
we do have heads and tails. on our coins.
Ah,
Like in the start of a soccer match, um, they flick a coin and
uh-huh.
uh, heads, tails to see which side bats or kicks off first. In my book on consciousness, mistaken identity, I try and grasp the nettle of what we're talking about. And that in philosophy, there is a technical term for this, heads and tails, and it's called dual aspect monism. So it's two aspects of the same thing. It's exactly what you're talking about. You can't have one without the other. And
Yeah.
that's my prefer. I can't prove it. Like nobody can prove what consciousness is. It's it's undeniable, but can't be proven yet, if ever. And it holds these two aspects together in non-dual monism, or technically it's called dual aspect monism. Have you come across the physicist David Bohm, Bohm?
Oh yeah, Tony was very into David Bohm and particularly into his dialogue work and and yeah, I've read a number of his books, the ones that were lay people can read, and I've heard many talks by David Bohm because Tony was very into David Bohm and he used to have these dialogues with Krishnamurti,
Yes.
which we used to watch in Tony's apartment often. So yeah, David Bohm, he was quite a lovely and remarkable man.
He came up with the theory of what is called the implicate order and the
Right.
explicit order.
Explicate order.
And
Yeah.
again, it's like the two sides of the same coin. It seems to me. But
Yeah.
coming back to the G word, um, I just want to finish off by trying to grasp a nettle with you on this. And you've actually mentioned it in when you read out that page from your. I think that's from your new book, isn't?
Yeah. Yeah.
You talk about dissolving into God, and the Christian technical term for that, by the way, is theosis, which is the
Uh-huh.
goal of Christian spiritual practice, is to become God, essentially cutting to the chase, to become God. But you also talk about God is also a relationship. Well, come on, Joan. How in non duality lingo can you have a relationship when there's not two?
Well, first of all, I think all words, no word holds up under scrutiny. That, any way we try to express this, you can pick it apart because the words are sort of automatically dualistic in some way, so you can't. And I think it's part of the mystery of God that it's both, and maybe the mystery of life, that it's both one undivided whole and at the same time shows up as this infinitely diverse universe. And, um, for example, I pray sometimes. And sometimes for me, the word prayer, and I think this is the way John Butler uses it, sometimes prayer is just synonymous with meditation. It means nothing more than being silent, being still, being present. But sometimes I pray with words, and for example, sometimes I do a gratitude prayer where I just express gratitude for everything that comes up in that moment in my mind that I'm grateful for, whatever it might be, my parents, my teachers, the place where I live, whatever comes up in my mind. And I also sometimes pray for all suffering beings. And again, I'll just name whatever comes up in my mind. It might be, people in war zones or people in prison or people who are ill or struggling with addictions or whatever comes up in my mind again, and I don't ever pray. I don't ever pray like when I had cancer. It was never like, dear God, please, please, you know, cure me of cancer. And if let's say I have a friend who's going through cancer or something, I might pray for them, but I wouldn't pray for them like, please cure their cancer. I don't ever pray for a specific outcome, but I might pray for them just in the sense of bringing them to mind, bringing them into my heart, and just, and somehow I do actually think that because everything is one whole, I do actually think they've done studies where praying for people apparently has an effect. Who knows? But I mean, it makes sense to me that it would, just because we are one whole infinite consciousness or one whole infinite whatever, and that there's so many ways that reveals itself, like when all the synchronicities that happen in life, and so yeah, so in those instances, I mean, what am I praying to? I'm really praying to the deepest part of my own self. I'm praying to what I most deeply am. I never think of it as I'm praying to some, old guy up in the sky or something, um, or some divine mother up in the sky either. So to me, that's what I meant by it's both what we are, and also it's a kind of relationship. It's paradoxical.
You touched on having an attitude of gratitude when you pray. Thank you for this or thank you for that. And Meister Eckhart again has a lovely saying: if you only ever pray one prayer in your life, let it be thank you.
It's
Uh,
true. I mean, it's like, and it's wonderful, for your own peace of mind and well-being, like to focus on what you're grateful for rather than, as so often happens in the mind, focusing on all the things we're worried about or upset about or something like that. To focus on what we're grateful for is, it just is a shift that's helpful sometimes. So can I mention that, in our last conversation I mentioned David Hinton, and you were sort of interested in him, who he
Sure.
is. He's the guy. We talked about him in our last conversation, that he's a translator of early Chan Zen texts and also Chinese poetry and stuff. He's just come out with a new book, which I just got in the mail yesterday, and I'm currently reading it. I've only read a few pages, but it's beautiful so far. This is the book of his that I mentioned, that I is a very beautiful book, Hunger Mountain,
I
and
I made a note of it last time, Joan.
yeah, and this is the book that I was trying to remember the name of and couldn't remember the name of. Wild Mind, Wild Earth, Our Place in the Sixth Extinction. And this book is about, it has a lot to do with, um, how religion, particularly I think Western religion, has often sort of divided, spirit and mind and body into two separate things, and seen the earth as sort of a negative thing, and we're always trying to transcend and go into something, you know and he talks about, the sixth. Some people say we're in the sixth mass extinction, largely human caused, and, he sees that as he's not saying it's a certainty. He says it may be, but he sees it as perhaps our greatest teacher. And anyway, so I just wanted to put in that little, clarification from our last time, that
Thank you, Joan.
on that book that I couldn't remember the title of.
That that's very pertinent. I have a suggestion. Maybe if next conversation, if indeed we choose to do a next conversation, let's make it on the Sixth Extinction or apocalypse or the end, the end of the human species as we know it. As religious practitioners, or as spiritual, as non-dualists, as people sharing the same groundless ground of being, should we be worried?
It's just planetary death versus, the death of Joan and Phil.
Oh, it's only a matter of degree then, Joan.
Yeah, it is. It's basically the same topic.
Well,
Yes.
we shall go there next time. I
Well,
I
hopefully
am
not. Hopefully not too literally, Phil.
not literally. I hope not. Who knows? I have a favorite saying. We're all in this together, Joan. We're all on our last cruise, and we're all helping each other along. But I'm going to
Yeah.
wrap it up now, and I'll see you next time.
Okay, and it's lovely talking with you, Phil.